morning to US and evening to India. Hope everyone is safe and sound during this pandemic. I, Deepika M, first year BCom student of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, would like to welcome you all to the 32nd International Webinar of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. Today's webinar is in association with Stanford University, California, US on Digital Humanities, Session 4. At the outset, I would like to thank Seshadripuram Educational Trust for giving me, a student, this opportunity to anchor this international webinar. I'm also very happy to inform you all that our evening college is celebrating its Golden Jubilee year. On behalf of our college, we congratulate all the stakeholders. Department of English of our college, in association with Stanford University, California, US, is organizing international webinar on digital humanities. I now request Sharanya K, first year BCom student of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, to introduce all the dignitaries to this international webinar.
Happy evening to India and happy morning to California. I, Sharanya K, first year BCom, Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, take this opportunity to welcome you all for this international webinar in association with Stanford University, California, United States. At the outset, I would like to thank all the office bearers of this great institution and welcome all of them. Now, I would like to introduce and welcome Quinn Dombrowski, Academic Technology Specialist, Stanford University, California, US, who is the theme speaker in this international webinar. She is the Academic Technology Specialist in the Division of Literatures, Cultures, Languages, and in the Library at the Stanford University. Prior to coming to Stanford in 2018, Quinn's many DH adventures included supporting the High Performance Computing Cluster at UC Berkeley, running the DIRT tool directory with support from the Mellon Foundation, writing books on the program staff of Project Bamboo, a 5 digital humanities cyber infrastructure initiative. Quinn has a BA, MA in Slavic Linguistics from the University of Chicago and an MLIS from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Since coming to Stanford, Quinn has supported numerous non-English DH projects, taught courses on non-English DH, developed a tabletop role-playing game to teach DH project management, explored trends in the multilingual Harry Potter fanfic, and started a Data Sitters Club, a feminist DH pedagogy and research group focused on Anne M. Martin's 90s Girl series, The Babysitters Club. Quinn is currently the co-vice president of the Association for Computers and Humanities, along with Rupika Risam, and advocates for the better support for DH in languages and other than English. Madam, on behalf of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, I welcome you for this webinar. It is my proud privilege to introduce and welcome one more distinguished guest who is presiding this webinar, Shri W.D. Ashok Sir, Trustee, Seshadripuram Educational Trust. Ashok Sir holds a master's degree in pharmacy specialized in the field of total parental nutrition. He served at the famous Al-Adan Hospital, Kuwait for over 30 years. He is a trustee of Seshadripuram Educational Trust. Sir is the backbone for all the activities conducted in our evening degree college. Sir, on behalf of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, I welcome you to this webinar. Now, I welcome our beloved Principal, Professor N.S. Satish Sir, to this international webinar. Welcome, Sir. I also welcome all the office bearers and trustees of Seshadripuram Educational Trust and also the principals of our sisters institutions, are the heads of the institutions, conveners, volunteers, and all the participants who have registered across the globe. Now, I welcome Dhareppa Konnur Sir, Program Coordinator, and Sunil Kumar Ji Sir, Coordinator IQAC. And finally, I welcome our own teaching and administrative faculties to this webinar. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, Sharanya, for welcoming all. May I now request today's theme speaker, Quinn Dombrowski, Academic Technology Specialist, Stanford University, California, US, to enlighten us on the topic of digital humanities beyond the English languages. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, and it's a delight to be here and to see how many people are here. And I hope I can give you something today that might inspire you to go out and try some of these methods yourself. I remember vividly the first time I encountered this kind of digital humanities work. I had just graduated from college, and I was thinking about the future and considering going to library school. And I saw a talk that had taken titles from thousands of books and actually looked at titles and how the length of titles over time, and thought about how digital humanities methods allow us to ask questions on a different kind of level than we might otherwise be able to do with literature and with history and with texts. And one of the challenges that I've always faced in my own work with digital humanities has been the disconnect between the topics that I found interesting and the languages that I worked on in my own scholarship and through my own interests, and the tools that were available and the ways that people talked about those tools. So what I'm hoping to do for you today is to help you think a little bit about how you might be able to apply digital humanities tools and methods, particularly those that broadly could be grouped as computational text analysis, to things that you personally find interesting, whether or not those things are in English. There's a long history of developing tools for computational text analysis. But one of the challenges is the question is what kinds of materials are we working on? Are we working on modern English? Are we working on historical English? Are we working on historical other languages? A lot of the work that's been done in fields like natural language processing and computational linguistics has focused on things that have kind of broad commercial use. Thinking about the Wall Street Journal newspaper, for instance, it is perhaps the most widely studied corpus of texts in the world. A lot of the work that's been done to kind of train and optimize tools for being able to identify parts of speech, for being able to identify people and places. Those are all intimately linked to kind of the material that it's trained on. And the Wall Street Journal newspaper has been used as kind of a test corpus for a lot of advancements in this field for quite some time. But I'd like to think about some of the work that's been done more recently about expanding the corpus of what people look at to other languages and other literatures and other corpora, including other newspapers and other literary texts. One of the challenges, if you want to apply some of the digital humanities methods that you can find online, and there's a wide range of them, including sentiment analysis, including part of speech tagging, dependency tagging. These tools can be really useful for allowing us to analyze texts at scales and in ways that we couldn't otherwise. So you can, as a human, you can read a novel, but you can't necessarily read 100 novels, or you could, but you couldn't necessarily remember every detail. Imagine, though, if you had 100 novels or 1,000 novels or 10,000 novels, and you could look across those, consider the ways in which they're similar and the ways in which they're different. And one of the interesting things is using these methods, it really allows us to, kind of challenge what we think about as similarity and differences across these large corpora. So for instance, if you want to, let's say we're talking about mystery novels, for instance, or science fiction, we have the ability, using computational methods, to look at the way authors create those worlds. What methods do authors use to invoke a scene that's creepy, or that's a different planet, or how do they depict kind of the intimacy of a family scene, and how does that change over time, and how does that change over different authors and different scenes? These are things that a single person could spend their entire life working on, particularly as people with jobs and lives and children. And I'm personally hoping that when mine make up, they go downstairs quietly and don't burst in here. Like we may not be able to spend the time that we would like to investigating these questions the way scholarship has traditionally been done. Not everyone has a position where they can devote their entire lives to diving into the very details and nuances, literature or historical documents. But digital humanities methods, assuming we're able to gather that corpus, which is another set of challenges, it allows us to actually investigate some of those things without having to dedicate our entire lives to doing it. It also allows us to maybe think a little bit differently about how we ask questions about texts. And what does similarity mean, and what does difference mean? I mean, we recognize the similarity or difference between two different texts because of their style when we read them with our eyeballs. But to ask a computer to do that, you have to be able to ask a more specific question. Computers don't understand style, but you can ask it about things like different distributions of words or different distributions of parts of speech. You can ask about, what are the most common verbs or nouns? So what are the things of the world of these books? Or what are characters doing in these books? In a way that would be incredibly tedious to do by hand, if you were to go through and try to count every instance of every word. And then, sum it all up and use that as some kind of measure for a book. But you can do it computationally, and you can do it fairly easily, assuming you have a basic set of tools for that. And this is where things begin to get a little bit more challenging. One of the advantages of English, which is less an advantage and more, I suppose, a historical remnant of the fact that it has been the focus of so much computational attention and work, and scholarship, and fine tuning down to the very details. Again, at least for certain kinds of corpora, particularly newspapers. One of the conveniences, I suppose, that we have based on the way these tools have been developed, is that in English, there's not a lot of inflection. We have a plural marker, there's a past tense, there's the difference between cat and cats, and walk versus walked, but more or less the words are the same. They don't change form, depending on how they're used, and this is in fact not universal at all. If you think about it, there are certainly other languages where this is the case. Surprisingly, perhaps it's more similar to work Chinese, if you're coming from English, than it is to work with Spanish, or for that matter, Kannada. Most languages have far more inflection. The words change shape depending on where they're used in the sentence and how, than we have in English. And so this immediately begins to run into problems with computational methods, because the computer doesn't understand anything. This is kind of one of the marvels of computers. They're capable of doing so much, and they're capable of doing so very little, all at the same time. With the computer, if you're trying to ask it to do things, with text, you have to be incredibly specific. And the fact is, the computer doesn't know everything that you know about language. It doesn't know that the past tense of a verb is the same as the present tense of a verb, or that the feminine form of a verb is the same as the masculine. All of those nuances of grammar that we don't even think about necessarily, are things that the computer doesn't know and can't know unless you tell it. Another way to get around, having to specify for the computer every single thing that you need it to look for, every single potential variant that it needs to account for, is by changing your text. And when we're working with, digital humanities methods, outside of English, or outside of languages that, have very little or no inflection, usually what we end up changing is not the computer so much as the text. And this becomes a challenge, because suddenly you're left with two forms of a text, where in English you might only have to use one. So in English, you can take the text that you can read, and you can feed it through the computer, and you can get out things related to word counts that would be usable, and that you can also understand. So most of the digital humanities methods, or at least a great number of them, ultimately come down to word counts, so counting words. And the question of what a word is actually a fairly complicated one, it turns out. From a computer's point of view, and from the perspective of most of these algorithms, a word is basically any set of letters in between two spaces. That's what it understands as a word, and it's going to count as distinct words any distinct set of characters in between spaces. So this means that things like hyphenation, can change the count. So if you're looking at a word that has a hyphen in the middle and the same word and someone wrote it without the hyphen, the computer would read those things as two different words. So there are some things that we do to the text first in order to kind of pre-process them and make them friendlier for computers to be able to read. There's something that we call tokenization, which is basically just split out the words from any associated punctuation. Because again, if there's a period at the end of a word, or if a word is in parentheses, the computer treats that as a completely separate word from the very same thing without those punctuation marks. So tokenization helps deal with some of those, splitting apart the punctuation. But usually for English, that's all we do. From there, we just count the words, computationally. To be able to look at frequency of different terms over time, to look at different distributions terms across different texts. So again, a set of texts that mention rocket ships or planets or aliens, we can tell at a glance, are more likely to be science fiction than a mystery, which might have a detective and might have a crime, or different kinds of literature. We can also look at things like different distributions of parts of speech. So at the Stanford Literary Lab, one of the projects has looked at the way, for instance, encyclopedias are written, or different academic disciplines write their academic prose, looking at psychology, looking at other instructional materials. And those works are written differently just in terms of the parts of speech and the way that words are strung together, than literature usually is. But you can use those patterns to be able to look at portions of novels and other texts that resemble these, pedagogical or reference materials. And you can sort of, once you find these spots, you can look at them and see what the author is doing there. Is it, a scene in the book where someone's giving a lecture, or is it a classroom scene? Or, is a character just conveniently explaining the backstory of, a murder, or, of how spaceships work? Mostly for the benefit of the reader. And these are things that we can identify computationally. That said, so once we do all of this with English, we have all the resources and tools available to do this with English, more or less. One of the funny things is, despite all of the work that has gone into, computational text analysis and natural language processing tools for English, they're still calibrated to the use cases that they were created for, which means that if you're interested in applying these tools to novels, novels are written a little bit differently than newspapers. And so scholars have recently, including David Baman at UC Berkeley, have started creating training sets that really are calibrated to kind of computational work on literature by literary scholars trying to answer literary questions with these materials. He's actually gone through and with his team annotated, excerpts from literature, with things like identifying people, identifying places, identifying names of characters, identifying even unnamed characters. So talking about, her sister's brother, for instance. So maybe a character that's relevant, but that certainly wouldn't come up using any of the off-the-shelf available tools for entity recognition, which is sort of what we refer to for identifying kind of specific things. One of the projects that I've been doing recently, I've been training an entity recognition model on clothing. So being able to identify what characters are wearing. And so putting, there is some degree to which not every question has an answer that can be done using off-the-shelf tools, but there are more ways to make the tools yourself that you need. So getting back to the question of how language intersects with this, if you're working in a language other than English, again, you're going to be dealing with some disadvantages. It is very much worthwhile work to do. I think a world in which we only study English and say that we're studying literature is a very impoverished one. But there are a number of challenges where, fortunately, people have been taking steps to ameliorate it. One of the first things that we have to do, as I mentioned, is creating these derivative texts that a computer can read. There are two ways to do that. One of them is referred to as stemming. And basically, this is the easiest way. Stemming takes a word and then tries to cut off kind of additional inflection pieces until you get down to something that resembles kind of what English would consider a word. So getting rid of suffixes that indicate tense, that indicate grammatical gender. It makes your text a whole lot more uniform and makes it a lot easier to count the words in a text and be able to kind of get word frequencies over time that are meaningful. The downside of it is, for the computer finds this perfectly agreeable, but the downside really is for the human side of things, where you're left with a text that is, in some cases, they may be difficult even to recognize because, for us to understand them and for them to have their meaning, they need these suffixes to be human readable. So that's somewhat frustrating. The ideal case for preparing a text, to be able to use these methods is a different method called lemmatizing. And what lemmatizing does is it reduces words to their dictionary form. So similarly, you end up with a text that is non-grammatical, again, because we need inflection to be able to kind of convey syntax and convey kind of the sense of a sentence. But what nonetheless, it gives us actual real words that we can recognize. So when we see these in our frequencies and distributions, it's a lot easier to make sense of. The degree to which these tools are available for languages varies considerably. Fortunately, it seems like, honestly, in the last couple of years, there have been significant advances in, getting at least stemming, if not lemmatizing, available, not just in theory, but in actual usable Python packages for many of the languages of India, and in addition to many other languages in the world. So that making it possible to use some of these methods on languages on texts and languages that are not in English. Suddenly it's possible to get meaningful results from looking at word frequencies, or honestly even being able to search texts. If you've ever had a large number of books that you were trying to look for examples in, it's really challenging to do if those books are in a language that has a great amount of grammatical inflection, because you have to search for part of the word, and part of the word might match a different word in order to avoid those suffixes. But using stemming or lemmatization suddenly allows you to search those texts, similarly to how you would if they were English. So with some embarrassment, because I would love to have, a corpus of things, in a number of non-English languages, to be able to demonstrate these methods for you. As often we end up doing, for convenience's sake, the small demo I have uses, it's kind of an unfortunate baseline that is everywhere. These large corpora are available for English, and they're often preloaded in tools. It's extremely convenient, and especially in contexts where many people speak English, it's a convenient common denominator. So with apologies for not having a better demo, I can show you what some of these tools can do using Shakespeare preloaded in this tool. So I'll pull it up and may be familiar for many of you. I'll show you some of the options that you can use in these tools. But please know that with a small amount of additional work, if you have text in another language you speak, and you can find a tool to be able to stem it or lemmatize it to kind of reduce the prefixes and suffixes and grammatical inflection that make it difficult. And if you want pointers to them, I can help pull some up for you. There are some really interesting and thought-provoking things that you can do with some of these digital humanities tools and a corpus of text. So I will share. If you're interested in actually exploring digital humanities methods, one of the best places to start is this tool called Voyant. Voyant was created by Stefan Sinclair and Jeffrey Rockwell. Stefan Sinclair sadly passed away last year. But you can tell from this tool, it really captures his playful spirit and his love for this kind of work, and the joy that he took in making it easy for people to do things with their texts. You can just paste text here. You can upload a text file. You can upload a whole set of text files, and it will pull in an entire directory. Again, digital humanities tools tend to work best in the sense of getting worthwhile results that you couldn't have gotten just with your own eyeballs reading a text, if you have a lot of texts. So one text is good. Less than a novel, you may not get a lot of meaningful results. Multiple novels or multiple plays or multiple long things can help you start answering questions that truly you would not have been able to do on your own, reading text with your eyeballs. So I'm going to choose to open the corpora that are in here already are Shakespeare's plays and Jane Austen's novels. We'll do Shakespeare's plays and open it here. You can see is the sort of explosion of color, which is kind of one of these joyful delights that I love about this tool. So if you've done some of this before, you may notice some of the words that are missing this word cloud visualization to start with. So it's important to note that there are some things that Voyant does behind the scenes. It takes the text that you upload and it does the tokenizing that I mentioned before, sort of the separating the words from the punctuation so that it can group the words more effectively. It also has a stop words list. And stop words lists are really important for some of these methods, because if we didn't remove the most common words, stop words are a list of very common words that kind of don't necessarily add a lot of meaning. So things like the and a and of. If we didn't remove those, this word cloud would have like the as the biggest word, which is not conveying a lot of meaning about this text for us. So if we go over here to the configuration, we can see the stop words list. These are all the things that it removed because they don't necessarily add a lot to the meaning. You can always change this, you can always add things to it or remove it. If we say kings and the lords and the shalls are taking over our word cloud, and that's not very useful. If we add shall to our stop words list, you can see that it will disappear from our word cloud here, giving more prominence to the other words in the word cloud. So this is one of the many tools here. Down in this panel, we see the summary of the documents. There are 37 of them that are part of this default corpus. You can see how many words and how many unique word forms. And even this alone is can be useful information and a way to think about your documents. Looking at like lexical diversity of this particular corpus. How many different unique words did Shakespeare use? Well, if this were his entire work, 25,114 unique word forms. That is, if nothing else, not something that you could have probably counted up yourself if you were just reading these books with your eyeballs. Looking at this here, you can see the document length of different ones, so you can see easily at a glance the different, which is the longest and which is the shortest. Again, you could probably guess that by looking at some of them, the difference between, Two Gentlemen of Verona versus Hamlet, Hamlet being longer, but precisely how much longer, it's easy to quantify. You can look at it in terms of vocabulary density, how many different words are in different books. And as you can see, these are different results than, how long they are. So just how much diversity is there within the words, how many different things do they talk about? You can look at sentence length. You can look at the most frequent words in the corpus, which here we see, similarly to the word cloud, which is also a visualization of frequency. Lord and king and sir. You can get a sense of like, what kinds of characters appear in many of these works. And then, over here, we see the most distinctive words compared to the rest of the corpus. And this is, a challenge that we often encounter, looking at computational methods and distinctive words here, is that all of the character names become the most distinctive words, because there's only one play that has Romeo and Juliet in it. So often what we end up doing in order to kind of get at the distinctive things that each work is about, rather than what are the names of all the characters, often what we'll do is we'll add the character names to the stop words list, or sort of remove them from consideration. And then, once we got rid of all of these characters, we would start surfacing things that, would be a bit more interesting about what the books are about. Over here, we can see the trends, where these different words are more prominent in which books. Down here, the horizontal axis is each is an individual work, and then here is the relative frequency of the term. So, for instance, king is relatively more frequent in King Henry VI and King Richard III. Also, the other part of King Henry the Eighth. This one again is not terribly surprising that, in works about kings, we talk about kings a lot. But you can also look at other things. You can put in your own terms, and we say, all right, how does love stack up? In which plays are people talking about love more or less? And you can see here, not surprisingly, I suppose, Romeo and Juliet is here, but actually it's not the one in which love is used most frequently. That's actually Two Gentlemen of Verona, which might not have been something that you would have thought of. You can also look down here for correlations. So which words tend to kind of go up and down at the same rate. So if we put in love here, which words tend to have the same kind of patterns of distribution as love? So when in works where love is common, what other words do we find? So Lord and Sir and good and enter. These in particular, if we add them here, you can actually take a look at how they go up and down together. So obviously it's not a perfectly good correlation. Some of them, Lord is very high and love is very low. There is not a word that kind of tracks along with love better than Lord does, even given the fact that it doesn't always. You can also look at the context of things. So if you, this is another option for being able to use your eyeballs and the computer together. If you put in love, you can see all of the places where it occurs and kind of a snippet of text before and after it. There are many other tools that are available as part of Voyant. There's a lot of documentation here. If you can sort of click on one and sort of see these networks of related words. There are many ways to explore your text computationally, and Voyant is an excellent way to get started with that. A lot of people have some reluctance to just dive in and try computational text analysis. They sort of have a sense that some of these methods require you to learn how to write code. You have to be a programmer to do it. You have to run complicated things from the command line. And what I would encourage you to do, if any of this seems at all interesting, is to just find some texts of things that you're interested in. Find song lyrics, find poems, find novels, historical articles, newspaper articles, any that that you're interested in, and a corpus that you're familiar with, and you know what kinds of questions might be interesting to explore. If it's not in English, look for something online to be able to stem it or lematize it, to be able to make the text kind of computationally usable, and then just upload it to Voyant, and play with it. It doesn't need to be kind of a serious research investigation that you undertake. Find a script for your favorite movie or your favorite TV show, and upload it and explore, how different characters are using different words, what correlations there are, how if you upload a single document, you can see this term frequency over the course of that document. So, how are people, using a word at the beginning of an episode of a TV show versus the end of it? Just play with it, explore. Think about, some of the questions that you'd like to ask it, and then just poke around at it on your own computer. Really, that kind of playful exploration is the best way to get started, with using digital humanities methods. There really isn't enough space, I think, kind of in academia for people to play, and this is a great tool to be able to do that. And just sort of explore the things that you're curious about, without having to, learn a bunch of things up front, or, being able to prove a point. You can use Voyant to prove points and make arguments, but you can also just use it to have fun and explore. So with that, I encourage you to try it out. Folks around the world have been working on trying to put together lists of resources for doing digital humanities work in languages besides English. We have a guide and some materials available. Oh, why are we turning it? Here at multilingualdh.org, we have a list of things. Oh, let me get rid of Google Translate. We have a list of resources available for being able to do stemming. So here's a Kannada stemmer that's available to be able to make texts in Kannada, usable for computational methods. We're gathering all this information, and if you're working with a language where we don't have a pointer to resources for being able to make your text usable, please feel free to drop me an email, and I'm happy to help you look for something that might make digital humanities tools and methods work for you, kind of regardless of what language you're interested in working with. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your insightful theme address. Now, the floor is open for interaction. As we are running out of time, we take up only few questions which we have received from registration form. I request Sunil sir to moderate the interaction session.
First question is, what are the benefits of digital humanities in education? What are the uses of DH in teaching and learning in our classrooms?
Yeah, a lot of people have started incorporating digital humanities methods even in like primary school grade levels, particularly with computational analysis of literature. It can help students understand stories better. Things about reading comprehension, for instance. You read a passage, and then if you see a word cloud of what were the most frequent words, it can kind of help make clearer what were the things that were being talked about. And you can also, you can also have a discussion about this was the most frequent word. Was this the concept that, kind of jumped out at you most in this story or in this article? For some people, the most impactful part of a story isn't the thing that's talked about most frequently. It's a particular dramatic moment or, a moment where something changed, kind of increasingly being used in different contexts. And honestly, it also, and particularly at sort of higher grade levels, and into university settings, it's a way to kind of get a handle on more different kinds of texts than you would be able to read. I mean, you couldn't necessarily sit down and read through 100 historical treaties, but you could search through them and look for certain keywords or look for certain terms, and how they get used in different places, to be able to kind of process in a certain way kind of more things a bit faster.
And the next question, in the context of language, if I ask, what are the challenges faced by the digital humanities with the English literature and English language?
Within kind of US based, I think in Europe too, academia, much of the challenges is in general, literature departments, are often very skeptical of these methods. They're skeptical of the value that they can bring. Hard to deny that you can answer different questions with them, but people might argue that the questions that you can answer with these methods aren't worth asking and aren't interesting. In terms of computational support, English is the most supported language. I mean, most people who work only with English have no idea kind of how difficult it can be if you're not working with English. It becomes its own sort of like bubble where people sort of make assumptions about how challenging these tools can be, like looking only in English, and really get the wrong impression. So if you're just doing English, other than sort of negotiating the acceptance of your colleagues, computationally, on the computational side, you're quite well off. It's everyone else has to work a little bit harder to make this work.
What are the dreams of digital humanities in future? Where would be the DH in future, according to you?
The things that are possible now are so much more than when I got started with this. I've been doing this in some form or another since 2004. And everything from what we can digitize and scan and turn into editable text. Suddenly, so many more things are possible. Now it's possible to scan a historical manuscript and use a computer to extract handwritten text from a treaty or a manuscript, into something that you can use computation on easily. People are doing amazing things with audio and video and 3D models, that weren't even imaginable when I got started. So there are so many things that you can do, and kind of as technology develops, it opens up new avenues. So it really.
Ma'am, there is a question in the chat box by asking that what we can do with the digital humanity degrees.
All sorts of things. There are places that offer digital humanities, like master's degrees. There are a few PhD programs. There are some undergrad certificates. These days, sometimes people go into data science if they have a background in computation along with a digital humanities degree. People go into libraries. People go into industry. Having exposure to digital humanities and ways to think about kind of combining computation with the messy, real human world is extremely useful in many different contexts. Companies, especially that aggregate data about their users, they have piles of things, and they have they need to figure out ways to make sense of more data than any human could possibly read, which is basically looking at all of Shakespeare's corpus, but blown up to a million. And having experience translating kind of the questions that humans want to ask into terms that the computer can handle and do something with are really useful. In business, in universities, in libraries, in many different places.
Just to add on to the literature part question, that ma'am, do you feel that, as we know that the world is divided under the different circumstances, like employed, unemployed, it's educated, uneducated, digitalized, not digitalized way. Do you think a language barrier is going to divide the people much more in DH also?
It does, and it has. There's a paper coming out in the journal Cultural Analytics by Andrew Piper, where he's looking at kind of how nationalistic our kind of large literatures versus smaller national literatures, and he used translations for all of them, which I can't blame him for. I mean, it makes it a lot easier if you're working with everything into translated English. If we all do that, then that basically cuts off access to most of the world's literature. It leaving only those things that people deign to translate into English. So I think one of the things that I've been working to do at Stanford and with colleagues around the world is to raise awareness of the fact that other literatures exist, and you can't just extrapolate claims that you make based on English data and say, yep, we've solved literature, because there's so much more there than we have in English. And so I'd really like to see more resources being developed, for people to do, similar things to what's being done for English, for many other literatures and languages, and to do different things, because even the questions we ask in English, are limited by what English offers as grammatical affordances. We don't have things like, cute diminutives in the same way that like other languages do. We don't have, kinship terms that other languages do. And so we can't ask questions about those. I think there's so much potential there. If we can sort of work together to get the tools in place to do it.
In the sense, ma'am, as we know that English part or English literature and in the DH, it's sync very easily comparatively to any other languages because of the technologies what we have in the hand. But in the other languages, along with the technologies, it's not so easy. So do you think that there is a possibility even for the other languages to get gel with the technology and enter into the DH in a mainstream?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like things are getting better. They keep getting better, but the pace is slow, and it really depends on the work of kind of like committed volunteers. It usually is. I mean, unfortunately, this work tends, this sort of community tool building, tends not to be, the result of someone in a well-paid job. It's people working, nights and weekends to do something because they believe in it, which, it isn't the model we should have, but it's how it seems to go. So, I mean, there's a package for, doing natural language processing called Spacey that has, had maybe support for like 6 languages to begin with, but they recently released a new version where, thanks to the help of some volunteers, even some small languages like the language Macedonian, now are supported, to an extent, much closer to English, than they were a year ago. So all of these things are possible if people spend time kind of contributing to some of these community efforts to build the tools. I just wish there were a better way to support that labor.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for answering the questions of the participants. A small announcement before the presidential remarks. We will send the feedback form link now in the chat box as well as to your registered mail ID, which will now be active for the next 48 hours. Kindly fill the same and send back for the e-certificates. The e-certificates will reach to you within 7 to 10 days. Very shortly, we will meet in one more international webinar of our evening degree college that is on 19th of this month. The topic is Anti-Caste Politics and Environmental Justice, Chapter 6, in association with Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center, American University, Washington, D.C., USA. May I now request Shri W.D. Ashok Sir, Honorary Trustee, Seshadripuram Educational Trust, to render the presidential remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thanks to Seshadripuram Evening Degree College from the Department of English in association with Stanford University, United States, in organizing this webinar, Digital Humanities, Session 4. So already 3 sessions in the Digital Humanities has been done. Today's theme, Digital Humanities Beyond the English Language. Theme speaker, Madam Quinn, has given a thorough and elaborate knowledge about the DH and how it is bridging up the gap in the English language as well as in the other languages. Just to say that we, from the session 1 to the session 4 now, it has all involved the great works of arts and literature, discussing about different areas of novels, literature, studying languages and philosophy of ancient cultures, examining traditions of another country or English language in the English country at the same time. Humanities representing, it starts bringing about a bridge between the arts, humanities, and the information technology. So here we are just bridging up the gap in the digital world to say that arts humanity is coming up in the form of digital technology. And also at the same time, digital humanity sorts of projects using computers to create awareness for teaching and research in the humanities has started in many of the other languages all at the same time, not only in English, many other languages in the European countries like the French, the Germans, and the Spanish have also started humanitarian in the technology wise. And similarly, I wish in the Indian orientation also be with the different languages and different older languages like Sanskrit should also see that digitalization and translation starts and many other works has to be carried out, and so that humanities has represented lot of arts in our country and humanities are there and we should that the preservation into the digital form should take place at the same time. In this today's topic, as it has been said, digital humanities beyond the English language, I just want to give an example using the French literature, wherein many substances in the digitized words has taken place in the French, to say that some social networks on French Revolution also has been given more of importance, just because today's topic says that digital humanities beyond the English language. What other languages have taken more constraint to give more importance to this digitalized word, in that how the studies have been done, it can be given by weekly writings with two main goals they have started in the French. To say that in the French writings on the regular basis, to allow students to practice the French expressions, grammars, and vocabulary, especially by integrating the new terms where they are learning. And the second goal in the French they are given to give the students a chance to spare their impressions, expressions, reflections, and questions regarding digital humanity activities and many other reading in order to bring it into digital forms. Many about the French revolutions, which are the old substances which they are having in their culture or in their history. So similarly, in the modern language classrooms, I just want to say that we have Sanskrit, the oldest language, and we should see that many of the softwares nowadays are giving the expectancy of translation of Sanskrit or Kannada into the English platforms. And similarly, it is very much useful to see that voice readers, voice aspirators are also there in the digital world, where you can study other languages and convert them into your language and go ahead to hear the other languages into different forms and acquire much more what you were seeing to. As Madam Quinn has told about tools like OAN, the software which gives you the English expressions, many of the grammatical things which are happening in the English literature. Similarly, we will have to see that many of the literatures in our languages have to be foregone with many digital things which are to happen in the coming days. I just want to once again go into stressing about what Madam Quinn has told, and she has explained in the many other forms that digital humanity works using the computers, creates a new awareness for teaching and research in the humanities. With this, I just want to thank Madam Quinn from the Stanford University, who has taken this important topic and given us an elaborate discussion. Thanks once again, and thanks to all the participants, and thanks to the coordinators and conveners of the English department and other staff of the Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, who have done this topic in such a wonderful manner. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, each and everyone. By this, we are concluding our international webinar. Thank you so much.